soup, the eating of soup is integral to the show. Food and eating is very important in the show. There's an entire character we haven't mentioned yet who is in
Hot
the first
pie.
season. Hot pie, yeah. He makes a delicious kidney pie that people love, and it is memed about repeatedly. I don't think he shows back up until maybe season 4. He might be in second season, but um, maybe even season 3. He's in a number of seasons, but all he does is make pies and be fat.
Speaking of food and trying to stay warm, the wall you should probably talk about.
Yeah, so John goes north to the Wall and becomes a member of the Night's Watch, where he is ridiculed by some of the prisoners there. As we said before, it's basically a giant labor camp where rapists and murderers are allowed to go instead of being executed. You can be exiled to the Wall. So most of the people there are just like maniac prisoners, and there are a few like actual knights. John's uncle Benjen is a ranger there, and so he goes because he wants to like hang out with his uncle. And as soon as he arrives, Benjen is like gone. He just rode north of the Wall and disappeared. And we'll never see him again. He's gone.
Yeah, he's forever gone.
And so we, the audience, know there's zombies north of the Wall. And so we're like, what's going on with that? So eventually we discover that all these idiots are just like, nah, there's no zombies. There's just wildlings, which are like barbarians who don't adhere to any of the laws of the Westerosi culture, who live up there, and there's like 100,000 of them or something. And they just hate each other. Like they view the crows or Night's Watchmen hate the wildlings because they just think of them as savages. Whereas the wildlings just despise everyone in Westeros because they view them all as like poofy lords or something. But basically, this entire plot is just Jon being an outsider and befriending the leader of the Night's Watch, Jorah Mormont. And the first season ends with the two of them leading a party north of the Wall to go find the wildlings and fight them. There are a bunch of other characters introduced. Sam befriends a big fat guy named Sam Tarly.
You mean John? Yeah.
Who did I say?
Sam befriends Sam. John befriends Sam.
Right. Yeah. Jon befriends. Basically, Jon's the only character there that matters, except Sam vaguely. Everybody else there will either be dead soon or doesn't have a name.
Pretty sure it's Jorah Mormont. Jorah Mormont is the one that's in the other place.
Correct. Jorah Mormont. Yeah, Jorah Mormont is Jorah's father.
Yes.
Jorah just gets his throat slit immediately in season 2, so it's not.
Jeor? Or Jorah?
There's the leader of the Night's Watch, Jorah, and Jorah, the man in Essos.
Yeah, you're saying those names like way too similarly, but yes. Never mind. Yeah, old man Mormont is killed.
Now
this is going to be the first. This is going to be the first and many issues with the names that he does.
You forced me into. I didn't want to have to do this, but now we have to do this.
Uh-oh.
Which is naming. So George R.R. Martin. He wrote a game called Elden Ring, which came out last year.
Oh no!
And he named all the characters
name.
really similar names, which oddly enough, all their names the same letters as his name. G-R and M. So there's Godfrey and Godefroy and
Godric.
Godric. Radagon, Radon.
Oh no.
Ronnie. Rena. There, it's the same thing in Game of Thrones. Every character has the same name. I'm
Especially if they're related, yeah, which
I'm
makes it that
trying
much more
not to get
difficult.
angry about this, but you've unleashed some anger here over the fact that Jorah and Jor have the same name.
Well, you said Jorah gets his throat slit at the end of season 2, which does not happen.
The the leader of the Night's Watch dies in the second season. Jorah Mormont is a simp who worked with Dany out in Essos. So that's a great bridge to talk about Essos, which is the whole other continent where the two remaining Targaryens live, Daenerys and Viserys, who were rescued as young children from King's Landing. And so they grow up in a whole other continent, and at this point they finally want to rule. They want to return to King's Landing and take their rightful place as the rulers. And so they know they need an army, and so they get set up with a fellow by the name Khal Drogo, who is like a barbarian guy who rules over this horde of Mongol-like people called the Dothraki, who are just like a brutal horse folk. Um, Viserys is the one who thinks he's going to be king, and so he constantly just berates and physically and sexually abuses his sister Daenerys, which doesn't go over well with Drogo, who marries Daenerys pretty early on, and Daenerys is smart enough to um, get Drogo to be sympathetic with her, and so Drogo kills Viserys in like the sixth episode, um, which is like one of the first major characters to die because it seems like they're setting him up to be important, and then he just gets massacred like really quickly.
Crowned in gold.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Molten gold is poured over his head and face. It's awesome.
Yeah, and he's such a shit character, like an asshole that you really do want it to happen. On rewatch, a lot of the scenes with Viserys are really tough. Like they're just really poorly paced out, and a bunch of them just feature nudity for no reason, and it makes me think that um they just weren't sure what to do with that character since they knew they were going to kill him really quickly.
Yeah, he's like a more contemptible like Draco Malfoy, who is like hinted at being crazy because of the incest in their family.
And because he like feels entitled to rule.
Yeah.
Like he's just told from birth, like, you're gonna be a good big king, aren't you? And he's like, I'm a big king. I'm a good big dragon king. That's what he said. Like that's what he says all the time. He's like, I'm the dragon. You're gonna unleash the dragon's anger. And then a bunch of burly barbarians just murder him. Here's your crown of gold. Yeah, Aquaman kills him with some gold. Aquaman is Khal Drogo, by the way, same actor. This is how Jason Momoa became famous, Mr. Mimosa. Basically, the rest of this plot is like Daenerys and Drogo fall in love, and then Drogo is like questioned by his own men because they're like, "Why do you take orders from this dumb bitch?" And he's like, "How dare you talk to me that way?" So then he fights a guy and like deliberately gets wounded. It's really unclear.
Yep.
Just to prove that he's tough, but then the wound gets infected and he becomes really sick. And so, meanwhile, their army is just committing atrocities like all over the land. And so Daenerys like stops a couple of women from being massacred at one of the places they go. And one of them is like, "Oh yeah, I'm a healer. I can help your husband." And so she
but it's
turns
like some
out
witchy shit. Yeah.
Yeah, it turns out not to be a healer. She's a witch. And the witch like tells Daenerys the only way to save Drogo is that she has to give up something like life pays for life, I think is the quote. And so Daenerys is pregnant with Drogo's kid. And so Daenerys is like, "Oh, then trade my kid for Drogo." So the witch does a magic thing and like brings Drogo back from the dead, but he's literally just like a vegetable. Like he's alive but doesn't have a brain and can't move. Um, So Daenerys puts him in a tent and lights it on fire with herself inside because she's like, well, I've got nothing now. Because the Dothraki all abandon her. They're like, yeah, this weird vegetable man he can't lead us anymore. So everyone abandons them, and she decides to just light herself on fire. But instead of dying, she discovers she's immune to fire, and she got some like rare dragon eggs earlier in the season. They just hatch. And so we learn that she's super magical and she hatches dragons, which haven't existed for hundreds of years. So that's how her story ends for the season is she just has a bunch of dragons now.
And
Three.
it's a great opportunity for them to go, oh, she doesn't get caught on fire, but all her clothes do.
She is naked repeatedly through the
Yeah.
season. Yeah, she is exploited
Yep.
heavily.
Yeah.
It should also be noted that there is a small council scene in King's Landing where they discuss having her assassinated, and Ned is like, "No, we can't have her killed. Why would you kill a child?" And literally everyone else is like, "Dude, we got to kill this kid. Like, you can't be hung up on moral." Like everyone there is like, "We kill kids. Like we don't care." So they try to have her killed, but Jorah, not Jeror, Jorah saves her life because Jorah has decided not to be a spy for Varys anymore. Jesus Christ, these
Yeah.
names.
Yep. I was waiting for that.
Jorah, it turns out, is exiled because he used to trade in slaves, like he was a slaver, which is no bueno in Westeros. But in Essos, as we'll come to learn, with the aptly named place Slavers Bay, slavery is a big thing over. Yeah, there's a lot of really George can be very unsubtle at times, which is great, but in the show it's always really funny.
I do also want to just call people's attention to the fact that there's Westeros, which is like, the West, and then there's Essos, the East. And we talked off screen about how it's really funny that like obviously this story is like from a Western perspective, and so it's like, oh yeah, all that Eastern shit, like in real life, yeah, we're just gonna write that as like really mysterious, and there's lots of sand and like lots of monsters, and the people are kind of funny and they're kind of weird and they look different, and there's slavery over there. Like that's basically how like anything that's in the East, that's like how they treat it, right?
Yes. Yeah, Westeros is basically an amalgam. It's like meant to be Great Britain. And it's basically like post-plague sort of 100 Years' War of the Roses
Exactly.
type medieval history. Whereas Essos is basically a combination of like Africa, the Middle East, and like China, like East Asia.
Yeah.
But there's lots of like mystery and weird shit, and they never really delve into it in the Game of Thrones books, and certainly not in the show, which we'll get into more with Daenerys' plotline down the road. But that takes us to the last character we've not yet covered, which is Tyrion's journey in season 1. So he starts off at Winterfell and decides to go visit the Wall because he just wants to see it. And at the Wall, he befriends Jon and Jeor Mormont. I still don't know how to say his name.
Yeah, just J or Gior.
Jeor.
I did also want to mention that Jon Snow is in the unique position of just always like he can't ever win because he's a bastard son. So like he goes to the Wall and no one likes him there because they see him as like this entitled prick.
Yeah, they see him as being too noble.
And he's like, I literally want to like work hard and like just be part of this. And they're like, even the criminals are like, he's an outcast. So he's just always an outcast. But yeah, anyway, Tyrion goes there.
Yeah, he was an outcast in the noble life for being too much of a simpleton, and then he's an outcast with the prisoners because he's too much of a noble.
Which draws a lot of pity from the audience. But yeah, Tyrion goes there as well. It's always fun upon rewatch and examination to see like where the characters go, and like you're kind of rooting that like a few characters will like meet up just because you want to see like what happens between these guys. And this is like a prime example of that. where Tyrion meets up with Jon.
Hmm.
But it's simply because he just like wants to see the wall, right?
Yeah. He
Yeah.
just won. I mean, he's like he's the smartest character in the show. At
Hmm.
least that's how he's billed and generally treated for the first few seasons. So he wants to just go to see this thing to learn about it, and he learns more from Jair Mormont, and he's vaguely told that like zombies and stuff exist, and he's like, "That's foolishness. This is nonsense, gibberish." And then he decides to go back south to go back to home in King's Landing. But along the way, all of this stuff is happening in King's Landing, and he's accused of having Bran almost assassinated. And so he ends up at the same inn as Catelyn Stark, which is where Hot Pie works, by the way. And so Catelyn uses like a bunch of bannermen there that are like Stark and Tully bannermen to just capture him, which is a great moment because she just like knows everyone's name and all the like house alliances. And so she just looks around and is like, "Hey, your uncle knows my brother, and hey, you're my cousin's cousin." And they all just like draw their swords and they're like, "All right, imp, in the cage you go." So she arrests Tyrion and accuses him of attempted murder on her kid, and then she takes him to her sister's castle in the Vale, which is called the Eyrie, which is like a big castle hidden in the mountains.
One of the
And
most irreprehensible characters.
Lysa Arryn.
Yeah, I rooted for her demise from the moment that she was introduced.
Yeah, she is very unlikable and very crazy.
Yes.
Uh, so despite being Catelyn's sister, Catelyn hadn't seen her in a while and didn't realize how crazy she had become. Um,
Her kid's name is Robin, right?
yeah. And Robin is like 8 or 9 years old and is still being breastfed. Um, so this castle is like this really tall castle that's like up in the mountains and it's really hard to get to the castle. Um, like the only way through is this like big, not quite a ravine, but basically like a series of canyons. And so I
Hence the
forget,
veil.
yeah, I think it's called like the Bloody Pit or something. It has a really funny name like that because like to get
That part of the book is like so much fun to read. Like
oh, the
just the
actual
description
descent
of the
up, or yeah.
scenery is amazing. Yeah.
So Tyrion goes and they have a trial, and they're basically like, "Yep, you did it. So we're gonna make you fly through the moon door, which is a hole in the ground in the like throne room,
Make the
which
small
just
man fly, mommy. Make
falls
the
like
small man fly.
thousands of feet below." And
Yeah.
yeah, Robin constantly talks about making him fly. But Tyrion demands a trial by combat, which is a thing you're allowed to do in Westeros, where
The
you
bloody
have
gate.
people. That's what it. Yeah, which comes up more on the show repeatedly, more in season 4. But uh, yeah, so Tyrion wants to have his brother Jaime fight for him because Jaime is like a renowned sword fighter. But Lysa's like, no, we're not bringing him here because he's thousands of miles away. And B, you need to fight right now. And if you don't have a fighter, we're just throwing you out the window. So then Braun, just a random sellsword who traveled with the group to get to the Eyrie, is like, I'll fight for him. And then Braun just kills this knight, like brutally, outsmarts him, slits his throat, and throws him through the moon door. And this is a great scene because then Lysa's like, "You don't fight with honor," and Braun just goes, "Yeah, he did," just like points out the moon door. So then he and Tyrion leave, and these two have a great
Chumliness.
yeah, great chemistry throughout the series. They just nonstop jokes with these two. They end up meeting some mountain men led by a fella by the name of Shagga on the way back south, and they eventually meet up with Tyrion's father, Tywin, who's like in the Riverlands preparing for war with Robb. And then there's a battle off screen that Tywin forces Tyrion to participate in because Tywin hates Tyrion and wants him dead. But Tyrion lives through his ingenuity and ability to just survive.
Yeah.
And then it ends with Tyrion
And
being
also
told to go.
Bronn. Like without Bronn,
Yes, yeah.
Tyrion, like that's a continual thing. He's both his sword and shield.
Mhm.
When Tyrion's brain can't figure out a way out of it. Bronn bench presses their way out.
Can't bench press your way out of this one, huh?
Yeah.
So yeah, then Tywin, who is technically going to be Joffrey's Hand of the King, sends Tyrion in his stead to do it, setting up season 2 where Tyrion will come to King's Landing. He also decides to bring Shay, a prostitute he meets in the camp, with him, even though Tywin explicitly tells him not to bring any whores with him. And there's this whole backstory with like a wife Tyrion once had who was a whore that like a bunch of bad stuff happened to because of Tywin hating whores and pretending to not use them. There's all this stuff. It's not important yet, but Tyrion brings her with him anyway.
Another reason why he and Bronn get along is because they both love their whores as much as their drinks.
Yes, they're both whoring alcoholics, just like Robert.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that concludes season 1. I don't know if you have anything to add. I'm gonna cross off some of these dead guys here. So Robert's dead now.
No, I don't have anything to add. Not in season 1.
Raga's basically dead. I don't think he does die, but he's never in the show again. All right, well then let's move on to season 2.
I'm sure we're forgetting something and someone's screaming at their phone right now, but that's fine. Dear God, Nolan, your spelling of Cersei is just so harmful to my brain. Cersei. That's how you spell it.
I spelled it wrong every single time.
Yep, and multiple different ways.
Mm-hmm. The best part is, like, I've read these books, which means I've read the name Cersei like 1,000 times and still got it wrong every time.
Oh my God, the names. I'm pretty sure there are 3 or 4 Johns. Jon Snow, John Connington, John Arryn.
Not in the show.
There's got to be another John. And anyway, yeah.
I don't know if any of the rest of them are in the show, though.
Tywin is Joffrey's grandfather, correct? And he is going to be. They're setting him up to be the Hand of the King, right?
Yes, but he sends Tyrion in his place. That's how season 1 ends.
Another Malfoy-esque character, Joffrey.
Yeah, so they established that Joffrey is a very bad man, and a common trope in TV with villains is once you've said that a character's bad, you have to show that he's really bad. And so season 2 is just a smorgasbord of Joffrey committing atrocities, primarily towards Sansa, but also he just murders a bunch of prostitutes. He just loves torture and murder.
Yeah, he's a very sadistic kid. Well, how old is he supposed to be? Like 15? Not even?
Something like that. 14 or 15.
Doesn't really matter, I guess.
Yeah, he's just a bad dude.
All right. Where do you want to start in season 2?
We'll start in King's Landing again.
All right.
So there, if it wasn't clear, some of the connections between the stories in season 1 only come together in that certain characters want to do something to another character and then it happens later. So like the small council says we should kill Daenerys, an assassin tries to kill her in the next episode. Somebody tries to kill Bran, Tyrion is arrested in the next episode by Catelyn. But in season 2, things happen a little quicker with more characters involved and they start to clash. So season 1 is based off of the first book in the series, A Song of Ice and Fire, which is called Game of Thrones. Season 2 is based off of the second book in the series, A Clash of Kings. And these two are the most faithful adaptations the show will ever do. Season 1 is very similar, other than just cutting a few characters out and changing a couple of things. It's like beat for beat, basically the same. And the same goes for season 2. So without further ado, I don't think there are many new characters in King's Landing in season two. Tyrion basically shows up and immediately starts to change things for the better. And he's instantly shown to be much more competent than Ned Stark was, where Ned Stark was getting outplayed constantly. Tyrion plays mind games with Varys, Peter Baelish, Cersei, and is able to like kind of slink his way around all of them. He sends Janos Slint, who is an evil guy who betrayed Ned, to the wall. In a scene that's pretty satisfying. We didn't mention him because he's just one of many side characters that
Yeah, we can't.
does bad stuff.
Yeah.
Oh, he'll come up later. We'll mention him when he is a coward in season 4 or whatever.
Oh yeah, fuck this guy. I looked up a picture of him.
Janos, yeah.
Very like also great name for someone you would hate.
Janos Slint.
The names of characters are so good in this. We're gonna start to approach some of my favorite characters, that's for sure.
Yeah, so most of the intrigue in King's Landing is not that important because there's not like a mystery to solve. Instead, the main plot is that a war has broken out across the kingdom over the succession because many different characters think they have claims to the throne. So obviously Joffrey is sitting on the throne. The audience knows he's illegitimate, so it becomes who do we root for? So Renly, Robert's younger brother, who we met in the first season, is like, it should be mine because I was his brother. But his older brother, Stannis, who we finally meet, is like, no, it's mine by right. I'm the older brother. It's literally my throne now. And so he and Renly, it is set up that they're going to do some battling. Stannis is a very straightforward man, similar to Ned, but even more like, I gotta do my duty. But in addition to that, he also is supported by and worships a fire cult. And so he is flanked by a like red priestess called Melisandre. And so in like the third or fourth episode of the second season, uh he has sex with Melisandre, who then births an evil shadow demon, which assassinates Renly, which is like a great series of things. The whole time, Stannis' second in command, Davos Seaworth, who is an ex-smuggler who now sort of supports um, Stannis in an advisory role. He does not like this. He's like, hey, this is pretty evil stuff we're doing. I thought we were the good guys. And Stannis is like, gotta do what you gotta, I don't know what to tell you. The lady told me that we get this stuff done to be king. So he instantly, like, before the war, which is called the War of Five Kings, begins, Stannis kills Renly. Um, I guess I'm kind of jumping ahead here. The War of Five Kings is between Stannis, Renly, Joffrey, Robb Stark in the north, and Balon Greyjoy is the other one, who is Theon's father. He's the Viking guy we talked about, who does show up very briefly, but basically does next to nothing. We'll get to Theon's story later.
Do you want to use this as an opportunity to mention the Tyrells as well, just because you mentioned Renly as well?
Yeah.
Okay.
So basically, because this is all relevant to the King's Landing stuff, but basically the Tyrells are like the richest or second richest family in the realm. And they're currently supporting Renly, and their young hot daughter Marjorie is set to marry Renly, but then Renly dies, so the Tyrells are like, who are we gonna marry now? But they are an important political player later. The only other character from
Renly
that,
also Renly also like would marry her, but is gay.
yeah,
And likes the Knight of the Flowers.
yeah, Loras Tyrell, who's called the Knight of the Flowers, who's gay. So
Yeah.
nice subtlety, George.
Yeah, thanks,
The Flower
George.
Knight is gay. Yeah, Loras is in season 1. It should be noted that there's a big tournament in season 1 that introduces a bunch of side characters that are all important down the line that we didn't mention. There's
The
a bunch of
Hound?
like subtlety that, yeah, we didn't mention Sandor Clegane, aka the Hound, who's Joffrey's personal bodyguard, or his older brother,
The Mountain.
Gregor the Mountain Clegane, who is an ever wicked man. He's always described as like the biggest man I've ever seen by other characters. Um, he like in season one, off screen, is just committing war crimes and atrocities like in the Riverlands. And so Ned sends a knight called Beric Dondarrion with a group of well-trained soldiers out to find him and capture him and bring him back, which is all important because Beric Dondarrion will be important later. Um, so yeah, the only other character that's important with the Renly story is one of Renly's Kingsguards, which is Brienne of Tarth, which is a huge woman who's not a knight, but she's a really skilled fighter.
I'm glad you brought her up. I was about to mention her. Yeah.
So she and Catelyn Stark, of all people, are present when Renly dies, and so she flees the Stormlands, which is where these Stannis's and Renly's armies are meeting. Brienne flees with Catelyn to go back to like Robb's camp out in the northeast. And Catelyn was only there because she wanted to broker a deal between Stannis and Renly to come together with Robb so they could just massacre the Lannisters. But it didn't work because Renly's like, I want to be king, and Stannis is like, well, literally, I have to be king. The law says it. So they just can't get out of their own way, and it causes what is it called when you kill your own brother?
Fratricide.
Fratricide, yeah. Yeah, Stannis commits some light fratricide there. There is a scene in the show where they're talking about all the different names for murder. Tyrion's talking with Jaime, maybe. He's just like, yeah, there's regicide, fratricide. And Jaime's like, is there anything for when you kill your own cousin? And Tyrion's like, nah, I guess there's not. Just as a funny note. So anyway, that's the background for Stannis raising an army and then just being like, well, I'm going to come to King's Landing and kill everyone there and take the throne. And so Tyrion, while he's doing all this political maneuvering, knows that Stannis is going to show up at some point with an enormous army and just sack the city and kill everyone inside. And the Lannister army is out with Tywin fighting Robb, so they can't come to defend the castle. So Tyrion comes up with an ingenious plan of finding wildfire, which is basically like green napalm / Greek fire, which is something that Ares, the Mad King, had bunches of stores of hidden throughout the city. And so Tyrion plays a tricksy trick and places it all throughout the Blackwater Bay, which is what's behind me here, which is the water that comes into King's Landing. And so Stannis sails his gigantic army up to King's Landing. And as they're coming in and just, it'll be a horrible massacre because his numbers are overwhelming, Tyrion has Bronn shoot an arrow and blow it all up. So this is one of the best episodes of the show and one of the best moments of the show, where this finally happens and there's an enormous battle, and Tyrion basically successfully defends the castle, repelling Stannis and his army. And at the very end, the Tyrells and the Lannister armies show up and finish off Stannis's other guys. But that basically does it for Tyrion this season. He is attacked during the battle by one of the King's Guard because he berates Joffrey. And it's implied that Cersei hired this guy to kill Tyrion because he threatened to kill Cersei earlier and also threatened to send Cersei's kids away. Because Tyrion uses his niece and nephews as bargaining chips, and he ends up selling off Marcella to Dorne, which is a place we'll get to later, to marry her into an alliance so they don't get attacked by the Martells in the south. How am I doing so far?
You're doing well. I'm still with you.
All right,
still here.
Just wanted to make sure because that's a lot of names and things. Meanwhile, Sandor Clegane leaves. He has a childhood trauma with fire because of his brother, the Mountain, and so when he sees this gigantic green nuclear bomb go off, he's like, "I'm out." He just quits. He's like, "Fuck the King's Guard and fuck the king," and he just leaves.
Mm-hmm.
Only other thing that really happens in King's Landing is Sansa has a really bad time for a season. Nothing interesting
Yeah.
happens. She's just basically a torture puppet for Joffrey.
Can
And
can you hear that microwave going? Hopefully not. There's a lot of sounds on my end.
no,
Okay,
can't hear anything.
that's good. Anyway, yeah, the same way I'm having a bad time with the sounds on my end, Sansa is with her life.
Yeah, so Cersei also like tortures her mentally. Um, at one point, Tyrion plays a trick where he tries to find out who on the small council is feeding information to Cersei. And so he tells Littlefinger, Varys, and Master Pycelle each a different lie. And Pycelle's is the one that Cersei ends up coming to him with. And so he has Master Pycelle beaten and thrown in jail. Because he thinks he did it, even though Pycelle swears that he didn't say anything and that it was Varys. So anyway, I guess we'll get back to Tywin and Jaime's plot for the season before Tywin shows up and saves the day at the end in Blackwater. Uh, Tywin and the Lannister army is mostly in the Riverlands, which is like the center of Westeros, battling against Robb and actually just getting beaten most of the time, which is surprising because Robb is just a teenager and Tywin is some like legendarily good fighter and tactician. Uh, he basically gets outmaneuvered. At one point, Jaime gets captured, and so Jaime ends up just being a political prisoner for the Starks, and they don't know what to do with him because
Catelyn is there as well, right?
yeah, she returns from the Stormlands to the Riverlands. Uh, and she ends up letting him go. She
Mm-hmm.
sends Brienne with Jaime off at the end of the season and is like, take him back to King's Landing and get my kids back, which is just a boneheaded, terrible mistake. Just
Very
giving
odd
up.
choice.
Well, everyone's furious with her because most of the Northern Lords are like, let's just kill this guy. He's a bastard, man. Let's kill him.
Is this where
And
he loses his hand?
in the third season,
Okay.
uh, yeah, that's most of the Riverlands. Robb is supposed to marry a son of Walder, or not a son, a daughter of Walder Frey, who's played by Filch, the Filch actor from Harry Potter. The Freys are just like a despicable house in the center of the Riverlands that control the Twins, which is this like critical choke point castle that is like the only way across this one river. And so they need to marry into that family to build an alliance with him. But Rob breaks his promise and marries some random lady instead.
The things
Uh,
we do for love.
So that won't come back to bite him in the ass. Oh boy. So in Essos, Daenerys is with like five people, her three dragons, and Jorah, and they get to Karth, which is just like some big secretive city, and she like skill checks her way into the city, and then has a bunch of really dumb interactions with the people there, which involves some nobleman named Zaro Zan Zarthaxis, something like that,
Yeah.
and a warlock slash group of warlocks called Quaith. And it basically, none of it has any consequence. Daenerys learns nothing. She ends up just killing all of them and then stealing their treasure and leaving Quarth at the end.
Continual pattern of hers.
Yeah, this is a relatively mishandled, if not just uninteresting, sort of poorly done plot in the show. It's
Yep.
not particularly good in the book either. The only part of it I really remember well from the books anyway is that towards the end, the warlocks show her a vision of the future, which is like all of this important foreshadowing, which goes nowhere in the show and is mishandled anyway. So yeah, just Daenerys basically does nothing and gets a bunch of money.
Kills a bunch of people and gets a bunch of money. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. John at the wall is traveling north. And so they go to this place called Craster's Keep, which is just this like
Oh
weird
God.
outpost full of women and this one dude named Craster. And John starts to do the math and he's like, there's all these women and only one guy, and they keep having babies. Are these all incest babies? And Jer Mormont is like, yeah, it's just shut up about it's just another one of those. It's okay. The incest is good. And we learn that Craster has a deal with the others, which are just like the zombie people, where he gives them his sons and they leave him alone. So they use Craster's Keep as an outpost to try to make contact with / fight the wildlings. And so they send out ranging scouting parties. John gets separated from his and then eventually is captured by. He captures a wildling woman named Ygritte. Ygritte.
Huh, sounds kind of like regret.
A thing he will come to do.
Yep.
I don't remember if this is the season that they actually like end up banging or not, or if that's the next season.
I think it's the next one. There's a lot of tension that, yeah, eventually has to get released.
So yeah, he finds this lady. He's out in the snow. It's not a particularly great season for John either. Theon in this season, Theon decides to betray the Starks after he visits his father and decides to capture Winterfell, which he does really, really easily because like nobody's guarding it. And then he like kills not Maester Lewin, but one of the other guys there, like some Stark guy that was a nice man.
Yeah.
And then a northern army approaches and his own men abandon him there. And the northern army like attacks Winterfell at the end of the season. Bran, Rickon, Hodor, who is this like big simpleton guy, Osha, who's this wildling lady that befriends them, and their 2 wolves all escape from Winterfell. Somehow this big group of weird characters escape and go off in the woods. And that, I think, about summarizes season 2. What do you say?
Bran is still broken and just has to ride on the back of people who can move him places. You talked about Tyrion's journey as well.
We did get to Tyrion's journey. I did realize I forgot about Arya.
Arya is kind of doing her own thing. Is she over in Essos, or where is she?
No.
Where's she?
She flips basically with Tyrion. So she leaves King's Landing with a guy called Yoren who intends to take her back up to Winterfell.
Right.
With a group of people who are destined to go to the Wall to take the Black. And she is with a guy named Gendry, who we met, who turns out is a bastard son of Robert Baratheon. And so she befriends this guy. Yeah, he's a really capable blacksmith. Arya has to pretend to be a boy instead of a girl, which becomes a common theme later down the line for several characters, but most importantly for her story of pretending to be someone she's not.
Oh, guess what? She meets Hot Pie.
I think you're right. She probably meets Hot Pie during this mission, this quest. Eventually,
all roads lead to Hot Pie.
All roads do lead to Hot Pie. That's true. Because he's in the Riverlands at the literal center of the world. And everybody needs to sleep in that stupid inn where he makes pies. His name is the thing that he makes, which is just like a very like old English way of naming things. Like John Smith, just, oh yeah, he's the blacksmith.
Good God, looking up a picture of him makes it even funnier, because that's not what I remembered him looking like.
He's just like a fat little kid.
Yeah.
Basically a Dudley Dursley type, if you will.
All men must dine. Oh God.
Balher Malpius.
Wow, we spent way too much time on hot pie.
He's
Um,
coming back. Don't worry. When we get to season 4, there'll be more hot pie. There's literally a scene in season 4 where Brienne ends up at this like
yes.
inn, and there's like a 2-minute rant where Hot Pie is like talking about making pie. In like one of the most interesting episodes of the show, there's just a 2-minute thing where the guy's like, some people don't know how to get the gravy right, but I know how to get the gravy right. It's like, what the fuck is happening? No reason for it. Just had to. Actually, there is a plot reason for it because he sees Arya at this point in the show, which becomes important for Brienne later.
Yes. Yes.
Anyway, Arya's
that was actually why I mentioned hot pie, because he recognizes her, or rather tells about her later.
Arya has an interesting journey because her group ends up being massacred by Lannister soldiers because they're basically like, yeah, fuck you, we're the Lannisters, we do what we want. And she ends up freeing some prisoners, one of which is a really weird guy named Jaqen Hagar.
Mm-hmm.
And so she and some of the surviving people in this weird wagon train end up at Harrenhal, which is this big haunted castle, which is under Lannister control, and they're carrying out all kind of weird tortures and things. And eventually Tywin shows up to Harrenhal and sees Arya, and he's like, why are you guys just hanging out with this little girl? And they're like, that's a boy. And he's like, you guys are idiots. So he takes Arya, not knowing it's Arya, under his wing as his like steward. So she pours him drinks, and she ends up being a participant in a bunch of really important conversations that Tywin is having with other important people. She learns that Jaqen Hagar is some sort of mystical assassin. And since she freed him, he gives her like a genie's version of 3 wishes, but it's 3 assassinations. And so she uses them on like 2 random people and eventually is like, can you kill Tywin for me? And he's like, nah, I can't kill Tywin. So then instead she uses like reverse genie rules to say, well, if you don't sneak me and my friend out of the castle, then I'm gonna have you kill yourself. I'll name Jaqen Hagar. And he's like, why would you do that, bitch? So then he just kills like 30 dudes and sneaks them out of the castle overnight. And she just keeps wandering off.
Yeah, Arya is one of those characters that her arc is both very interesting, but is also like chock full of very strange like Deus Ex Machina characters. Like when I don't want to jump the gun, but we'll talk about where she goes after this.
Well, that gets us through season 2, so I don't know if you
Yeah.
want to like talk more about season 2 or just jump into season 3.
No, I want to talk about like everything at the
Everything.
end. I mean, season 2 definitely starts propelling everything. Like there's more battles that are like
Mhm.
actually shown, kind of like what we talked about before, where they didn't have as much of a budget. Like the show really starts getting quite a following, and the budget increases with the number of characters as well.
Mhm.
Um, things really start to feel like they're coming together in a lot of ways. Like from a storytelling perspective, they're really connecting things for the audience. It's really enjoyable. The action is propelling. Characters start to get their own like following. You could say where people are divided into camps.
Yeah,
Um,
team X versus team Y.
yeah. Um,
Everybody loves Rob and hates the Lannisters because he's literally just a good guy and they're mustache twirling villains.
yeah. Just it's the same thing as just like getting upset that the Chiefs are like going to the Super Bowl. Like, I'm tired of them winning. It's time for another team to win. They're evil. It's like, do you not understand how a story works? Like, clearly you're supposed to root for Rob, but like he's like a good person or something, like a good king. His family's good. He had an honorable dad. Like
The
I don't.
both of the characters I was rooting for at this point in the show, both meet basically the same fate, which is where they go from being intelligent to turning their own brains off and then committing a weird form of seppuku.
Yeah, like I guess my point is that like if you're a teenager and you're rooting for a character, that makes sense. It's also fine to root for like main characters, like for them to, I don't know, get what is coming to them, to like see a payoff with them, right? But like I don't know, if you're just focused on the story or like the movie or the show, like I just find it weird, like root like some of the best movies and shows, I think if you are rooting for a character, you're just like missing the point, is kind of what I'm saying. Like you're just
Mm.
limiting yourself through like a really small window as opposed to just like trying to think more about what's happening and feel more of what's happening. Like if you're just so caught up on, well, I just didn't like that like they didn't win. Okay. Like why are you only thinking of that? That's just a weird thing to focus on.
I think I generally agree with what you're saying, but I think this show really leans into that type of tribal behavior.
Yes.
Like, especially as it goes on later, it becomes like, which team are you on? The problem is the stakes become less and less morally gray. Because at this point, you could root for the Lannisters and be like, yeah, they're mostly evil, but Tyrion's like kind of a good guy. And so even though he realizes that like his efforts to commit these like Blackwater Bay atrocities are in service of an evil king and his bad sister and his wicked father, like ultimately he is a empathetic, likable character. Whereas Rob Stark is kind of like his dad, where he's an idiot, and the decisions he's making are screwing him over rather than playing a political game.
I guess
Um,
ultimately where I land is like rooting for characters in this is like makes sense to see their like character pay off, but like rooting for a family I just find to like not really make a lot of sense given the moral ambiguity and like shadowiness of each family. Like the family has like many different parts. That was not me, by the way. That sound. Like the family has many different parts that have good and bad to them is what I'm saying. So like if you're just rooting for a family, like you're rooting for partial good and partial bad. I don't know. I just think it's a weird thing to get hung up on basically, but I also try to look at a story for the like whole forest rather than getting caught up on like a branch of it.
yeah, like I think what you're describing is more if you read the books and felt more that way. I just think the show inherently like forces you to pick a side and just root for that rather than viewing it more as some grandiose story with an interesting endpoint incoming,
Yeah,
especially
I
given.
also I also have the perspective because I've seen the whole thing and read the books, is that like I can reflect back on it if I'm watching it again because I have 2020 vision for where it went
Well,
as opposed to just working through the first time.
the show by the fifth season has created its own self mythology. Like the show grows an ego, which it
Yeah.
strokes, and the way in which it strokes its own ego hurts the show the more it goes on. Because there are characters who meet each other, and it feels like those characters are no longer the characters that the show itself created. They are the characters of the show. And so they meet each other and go, hey, I know you from that hit show Game of Thrones. And they go, I know you from season 2 of Game of Thrones. And they act as though they know the character. Like, it's almost this weird meta way where they wave off the fact that the characters wouldn't have met or known each other before. And then they just magically know each other and they're like, we're friends because we've both seen the show that we're in.
Right.
Or the way in which the characters talk about the Game of Thrones. Because Tyrion talks about it, Daenerys talks about it. They talk about playing the game, which is the Game of Thrones. because the show wants you to root for X person to be on the throne at the end. And so that's what it all comes down to, is who are you rooting for to be the one who ends up in the chair at the end of the show. I agree with you. I think it's stupid to do, but that's what the show wants. It's very different than
Yes.
the books. The books are about a grand narrative and seeing how morally gray people create a very chaotic world filled with war where nothing is accomplished and everyone dies and life is meaningless because there is no goal. Like when you become the king, nothing happens. Like it's just some chair and some title that vaguely grants you more power. But those are questions that are asked both in the show and the book very effectively. What is power? Who has power? What does it mean to have power? And the answer to it, the show answers and the book answers, is nothing. It doesn't mean anything at all. It doesn't matter at all.
And I think that's actually part of the beauty of what the show is. Like what I'm driving at is that it shows the vapidity of power, as well as like what happens when you do whatever you can in order to get yourself on the throne.
But the show wants to have its cake and eat it too. So it
Yes.
ends up pooping in your face for
Yes.
you, like wanting to root for characters, but then it also takes itself seriously where it's like, no, but this is a super cool fantasy world.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like you can't have the show be like flipping the bird at its own audience for enjoying this type of thing while also trying to maintain like, no, this is a really good, we're building this world real good now.
Yeah. So we still have another 2 seasons to get through before we start to really see the death knells.
Yeah, season 2 is great. I mean, I know I remarked that like Daenerys' stuff was a little weaker, but that takes up much less of the runtime than her plot does generally.
Mm-hmm.
And when it is used, it's mostly used to break up other episodes, just to be like, back at the ranch, this is happening in Quarth. Karth, or however the heck it's pronounced.
Back at the ranch.
Yeah, you're not familiar with the term back at the ranch?
No, we've talked about it before. Just every time, I just love that.
That's one of those like MacGuffin type terms. Like
Yes.
Hitchcock used it. Yeah, thankfully we haven't gotten into the MacGuffins yet in this show. Eventually, this show is just going to become a series of fetch quests and MacGuffins. Anyway, season 3. We'll jump off with Arya because that's where we left off with season 2, since I almost forgot her. Arya and Gendry are just wandering around in the Riverlands, and they get captured by a group of people called the Brotherhood Without Banners, which are basically these just like anarchic maniacs who wander through the Riverlands hanging people for no reason. And they're led by a drunken red piece like Melisandre, whose name is Thoros, and Beric Dondarrion, that guy that Ned Stark sent out. And it is revealed that they have captured Sandor Clegane, and so they put him to their own trial, and they say it's a trial by combat, so he has to fight Beric Dondarrion, and the Hound just kills him pretty easily. And then Thoros just like does a prayer and brings him back to life. And Beric's like, yeah, I've been brought back to life like 6 times already. The Hound killed, like, his brother killed me 3 times. Like, I don't even care. Just a weird example of how they use magic in the show, where just Beric Dondarrion can't die. He just has to keep coming back for some really important purpose. What could that purpose be? Anyway, it's really bad. Oh boy, it's the looming last season here is shadows long. So anyway, Arya is like, these people are all really stupid, and then Melisandre shows up and meets with the Brotherhood and buys Gendry from them because she knows that Gendry is of royal blood, and so they need to get his blood to do some Melisandre.
Right.
Because she wants to do some evil blood magic back at Dragonstone with Stannis. So Arya and the Hound eventually just leave the Brotherhood, or the Hound rather kidnaps her from the Brotherhood, and he's like, I'm going to take you to see your mom, and I'm going to sell you. and that's where we'll leave off with them. So we'll join up with
John or Tyrion?
probably makes sense to do Tywin.
Tywin, okay.
Yeah, Tywin in the capital. So Tywin replaces Tyrion as Hand of the King, and he's a much more brutal ruler, and people sort of just respect him because of who he is. So he's able to sort of stabilize things in King's Landing. And he has more of a grasp over Joffrey. He lets Joffrey get away with fewer insane butcherings and torturings of people. Tywin forces Sansa to marry Tyrion, which neither are happy about, and they refuse to consummate the marriage because Tyrion is a nice enough guy that he's not going to rape Sansa. So that's good.
Yay.
Yeah. Other than that, Tyrion accomplishes very little this season.
Aside from not raping.
Yeah, this is kind of a weaker season in King's Landing.
The Martells do arrive, though.
Yes, so Marjorie Tyrell arrives, and she.
Oh, I said Martells, but yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, the Tyrells, not the Martells.
Okay.
Marjorie Tyrell, not the Martells. The Tyrells arrive, the Tyrells of Highgarden. And so we met Marjorie before and Loras before.
Yes.
Loras.
The Knight of Flowers.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Initially, he maybe was going to marry Sansa. Like that's what they sort of set up, but then it's pulled out from under a rug and she's forced to marry Tyrion. Marjorie is set up to marry Joffrey because the Tyrells and the Lannisters want to like grow together as a power family. Because the Tyrells have tons of men and tons of food, and the Lannisters have tons of gold and the current seat of the throne. So when they put all that together, they, have tons of power.
Further reflecting the War of the Roses as well, and like that time period of trying to intermarry between families to strengthen one's self
and create stability. But unfortunately for everyone involved, several of the people involved in this scheme are completely insane and have access to magic. So it's not going to turn out well for anybody. Marjorie is a great character. She's like really charismatic and like steals every scene she's in, as well as Olenna Martell, Olenna Tyrell, who is Marjorie's grandmother.
She is so good.
Her son is appointed as part of the small council. I don't remember his name. He's just like literally some oafish buffoon Tyrell that everyone makes fun of for being an idiot, including Olenna. But Olenna basically just roasts everyone. She's just an old lady who constantly tortures people. Like they come in and she just ruins their life with words.
Mace Tyrell, is that who you're talking about?
Yeah, Mace Tyrell.
Oh my god, what a disgusting looking creature as well.
It's funny you say Diana Rigg because I just realized we actually have not mentioned really a single actor other than Sean Bean in the show. This show is filled with phenomenal actors. Most of the performances are really top notch. Some careers were kind of made by the show. Probably most notably Kit Harington, who plays Jon Snow.
Definitely.
And he married the lady who plays Ygritte, which I guess is worth noting because their chemistry is really good, specifically in this season.
Did not realize that.
Mm-hmm. Tywin is played by Charles Dance, who's like a great English actor. I mean, everyone in the show is like English or Irish or Scottish, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
They do maintain that continuity. There's no stray Americans that weasel their way in.
Thank heavens.
Actually, that might not be true.
What about Joffrey?
No, he's English. That guy's retired.
He just made a boatload of cash and was like, I'm done.
He was like, yeah, I think this is a dumb profession. Fame is vanity. I think he said stuff like that and was just like, I'm out. Just played an iconic role and quit at the top. Yeah, so that just about does it for King's Landing. Sorry, I don't want to go down too much of a rabbit hole of all the great actors in the show.
Peter
Many of them
Peter Dinklage is
we did
American.
mention.
Pedro Pascal,
Oh,
who is gonna come up. Ah, what?
oh,
What?
oh.
What? What?
Peter Dinklage is American?
He's from New Jersey.
Oh, God.
I didn't know that, but
This is all right. This is a terrible show.
Jason Momoa is born in Hawaii and raised in Iowa.
That's Hawaii's not in America.
Pedro Pascal is Chilean born but American.
He isn't even in the show.
Not yet.
He's in 7 episodes.
You asked for people. There you go.
Damn.
I did not know that Peter Dinklage was American.
I just definitely
Definitely
thought he was English.
think that. So did I.
Based only on the fact that he has a weird accent in this show.
Yeah, there were several people who commented his accent was atrocious, but
His acting steals a lot of scenes, but his accent is not a part of that.
it's a weird and oddly affected accent.
Well, I guess, yeah, I'm not even right at all, because like Nicholas Kloster Wurger or whatever his name is, the guy who plays Jamie is like Danish, I
Danish, think. Yeah. It's fine.
Brutal.
Lena Headey.
No coming back from that.
Definitely British.
Basically, just because Charles Dance, Diana Rigg, and Sean Bean are in the show, everyone's British. That's all that matters.
King's Landing, wee tiny pea bitch marries Sansa. All right.
Yeah, that describes everything Tyrion does this season. He kind of feels sorry for himself because of the stuff with Blackwater and
you mentioned what's Kit Harington? Yeah, Jon Snow.
Yes.
So he's up north. He parlays with Mance Rayder, who's like vaguely chieftain or lord of the wildlings.
The king beyond the wall.
Yeah. Goes over the wall with Ygritte. Oh yeah, Tormund is introduced.
Yeah, he comes back over the wall because he's across the wall.
Right.
So they climb the wall.
Yeah.
It's a great scene, great episode called The Climb, which also features a monologue by Littlefinger where he talks about the chaos as a ladder. Because he and Varys just like have a scene where they're in the throne room and they're both just doing this, like it's like in between Jon climbing the wall, and it's like, oh, that's a pretty good metaphor.
What's this category over here? Is this Stannis?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Stannis does a literal and nothing this season. He sends he is angry because they didn't win the Blackwater battle, and he sends Melisandre to get Gendry, and then they get Gendry.
Mm-hmm.
That's all that happens. His daughter's in the show, Shireen, just like a little kid with grayscale.
Yep. Do we talk about Bran?
Bran meets
this season.
Jojen and Mira Reed. Jojen is another weird kid who has visions. Bran is starting to have weird visions. Jojen and Mira are Reeds, and their father was good friends with Ned. Mm-hmm. He's not been in the show. I forget his first name, but Reed is Water Deep or something. He's at some castle that they never show in the show. In fact, that guy just never shows up again in the show. But his
Howland.
Howland, yeah. Is his castle Water Deep?
Greywater Watch.
Oh.
Yeah, they're a vassal house.
Mm-hmm.
Who holds fealty to Stark. Yeah, they're the southernmost house of the North. For anyone who needed to know that about the Reeds. Yeah, so Bran doesn't really do all that much except for meeting them.
I think they get to the wall this season.
Yes.
And then they go under it and I think they meet up with Sam. Sam Charlie has his own side quest this season where he and one of the women at Craster's Keep,
Oh God.
because at Craster's Keep, the Night Watch mutinies themselves, led by this maniac named Carl Tanner, who's just like, I'm sick. He's basically the guy from the Two Towers who's like, we've been eating nothing but maggoty bread for 3 stinking days, and then they just mutiny Joe or Mormont and kill him, and they kill Craster, and then they just sodomize the women for several weeks. So Sam takes Gilly, this one lady, and they get out of there. And they go on like a weird mission to get back south of the wall. They meet up with those evil zombie guys. What are those guys called?
White Walkers?
Yeah, that's it. They meet up with a White Walker and Sam kills it, which is important for later.
How does he
Uh,
kill it? Does he have?
he's got a dragon glass thing because in
Okay.
season 2 they go to the Fists of the First Men, which is like
Hmm.
some station way up north. And they find a bunch of dragon glass weapons, and so Sam has one and he kills the White Walker.
Right. That's right. Yeah, they acquire those and they like kind of go over the importance of dragon glass.
And I'm
Um,
pretty sure in the show, Sam meets up with Bran and it's like, hey, nice to see you. I'm friends with your brother. And they're like,
yes.
hope you find your dad. And then they go their separate ways.
Yep. The narwhal from Elf.
Correct. Mm.
Cool. So then the only so then the only person that we need as usual is Daenerys. Uh the reason we leave Daenerys for last, by the way, is because of the way that the show treats Daenerys. We talked about this off screen, but like Essos and like everything that happens like in the other realm, it always feels like it's not filler per se. It's definitely not filler, but it's kind of like when we need a break from the action of Westeros. They're like, "Oh yeah, let's go check in on that like light-haired ladies. What's going on with her and those dragons?"
It feels very disconnected from the rest of the plot because the rest of the characters like occasionally interact. Like some character from one storyline or place meets up with another. And so there's tons of characters that bounce off each other, or they'll mention someone who's like 800 miles away but did a thing relevant.
Mm-hmm.
Everything Daenerys does is in a vacuum in Essos. So
Yeah.
even though her goal is to take over the throne, she's still just not even close to accomplishing that goal because she needs an army and a bunch of ships and for the dragons to be bigger because right now all she has is like a couple treasure chests and some small dragons.
And a few followers.
Yeah, like 7 guys or something,
Yeah. So she
including Jorah Mormont,
so she goes to
simp
Slaver
extraordinaire.
she goes to Slaver's Bay, aptly named Slaver's Bay, meets a bunch of slavers. Obviously slavery is bad, so she needs to, free the slaves. Um, and she also comes across the Seven Sons here, or
Mm-hmm.
like
Yeah.
acquires the Seven Sons basically. And yeah, then there's this other group called the Unsullied who are, oh God, they are soldiers, but they're all eunuchs.
Mm-hmm.
Like through, did they make that choice or is it forced on them? I forget.
No, they're all slaves.
Yeah. So
They're
so this is
slaves who
an
get snippy
army,
snipped as youngs,
but
and
they
then they're
still
trained to
have
be
their
brutal warriors.
dicks, maybe, but no balls, possibly.
No, the no balls is a joke that they make constantly, but it is, I'm pretty sure,
Yeah.
never explicitly said, but heavily implied that they still all have their penis.
Yeah. And
EPPs.
and so she frees a bunch
Do
of
they
slave.
take the pillar or just the stones? That's an actual quote from the show. Just sorry.
So Daenerys has to be the white savior here. So she frees a bunch of slaves.
That's the
And
next season.
oops. So she kills a bunch of people again, and obtains Dario, whatever his name is, who changes actors in the next season, and then also gets the Unsullied Army. So she acquires the like army of slaves. So she's gonna keep doing this trope of killing a bunch of baddies and then obtaining people for her like force.
Well,
Um,
she meets with the three leaders of the Seven Sons, which is like a large mercenary group,
mhm.
and she tells them she wants them to join her, and they all laugh at her. They're like, "We're just gonna
Right.
rape you and take your dragons and your gold."
Is
But then,
Dario part of that, or is he
yeah,
another guy? Okay.
he's one of the leaders, and so he is like comes to her in the middle of the night with the
Yeah.
other two guys' heads and is like, "You're just so beautiful that I betrayed my other friends and now I want to be on your team," because he's also a simp just like Jorah.
Every person who sees her silver hair just,
Immediately just, yeah, creams their pants and joins her cause. And that
yep.
goes for other women as well.
Yes.
uh just that made me realize there's a character we haven't mentioned yet, but uh
Sandy.
no, that's she's not important until the until the Bells episode, or until the line of dialogue where she's asked by Daenerys if they take the pillar and the
Who's
stones.
the character we didn't mention?
Yara Greyjoy,
Oh,
who will
yeah.
come up. Actually, I don't even know if she's in season 3.
I think she is in season 3, but barely. Like they show her face or something, and they've
Because she's
mentioned
just
her
with like
name.
Balin Greyjoy, and they're just like
Yes.
sitting somewhere in a dank castle, being
Yes.
like, "Yeah, get some ships and shit."
And her character is great in the book, and in the show is just a cardboard cutout of a lesbian.
That is true.
Yeah.
I
So
will
like,
say of Daenerys' plot, the part where she obtains the um Unsullied Army is cool because she tricks the traitor,
that's what I was
the
just gonna come back
Yunkai
to.
traitor.
What I was gonna come back to is that, how do I put this? There are parts with Daenerys that are really cool, but like the overall plot of her can be like really generic feeling in a lot of ways. So it's like easy to write off her character, but she has really awesome moments. And that's also like I'm proud. I probably have that perspective just because of the book. Obviously, like her in the book is just like way more badass and way more fleshed out. In the show, it's more just like, what's going on in the East? What's going on with that dragon titty lady? What's
I
what's
mean, so
happening over
far it's
there?
basically all the same.
Yeah.
She
Um,
gets the Unsullied the same way. She pretends to sell Drogon, her biggest dragon, to the Yunkai trader, and then when she sells it to him, she just has Drogon kill him, and then she takes the army for herself. And she frees them, but they're like, "We're slaves, we don't even know what that is." So they just agree to be her slave army forever and
and
ever.
they're not simps for her because they don't have any testosterone left.
They're simps for her. Except Grey Worm, their leader, who's a
Yes.
simp from Missandei, who is Daenerys' translator
Yes.
slash gossip pal. It's these
uh,
characters are still good at this point. I should point that out that I actually do like this. The third season of Daenerys. 1 and 3 are probably the peak of her as a character in the
I think I
show.
was confusing this season with 4, which in the book is like really like I would say motivational and inspiring. I don't want to jump ahead to that, but like, yeah, that's why I was saying the things that I was saying about this season, because I thought it was season 4.
That should be noted now. We didn't say it before. Season 1 is book 1, which we said. Season
No,
2
you
is
said
book
that.
2.
Yeah,
Season 3 and season 4 are book 3.
yeah,
A Storm of Swords is 2 seasons of the show.
that's why it's
And so
confusing.
there is so much that happens in the book that they split it up over 2 seasons, which
Yes.
is kind of hard to do. And this is where these seasons are still great seasons of television, no doubt. But this is where they're starting to bend under the weight of the books
Mm-hmm.
because it's not a clean way to break up the narrative, which is why like the parts in King Landing don't feel fully fleshed out. Like it feels like some of the material is filler material. Like the A material is all gas and the B material is all still pretty good, but some of the C material feels stretched thin, or maybe it's just not executed perfectly.
Yeah, that's fair. Um, okay. Do you want to go through 4 then before we like go through the last of it?
Through the well, we didn't talk at all about Rob or Theon.
Let's finish Rob and Theon and then take a break.
Okay. Theon gets tortured for an entire season by someone that we don't know who they are. Some random guy is torturing him and he cuts off his penis. And he keeps asking Theon, if you can guess who I am, I'll let you go free. And Theon's like, I don't know who you are. I don't know what Northerner you could be. Like, if you go through your head and think about what Northerners we've met so far, because they tell you all their names and all their banners and stuff. And there's like the Starks who are wolves, and there's like the Umbers who are just like these big giant guys, and Karstarks, and there's,
The
the Reeds who we
Mormonts.
talked about, and the Mormonts who are bears. And then there's the Boltons who are the flayed man.
Mm-hmm.
It's a Bolton guy
The
who
funniest
likes
part,
torturing people.
the funniest part of you mentioning this is like your background does like if I pull chat up, it shows the full background, which shows Roose Bolton in it, but if you take the chat away, he's hidden. Uh, but yeah,
Oh yeah, I can see the whole picture, but yeah, I don't know
I
how the
think the
stretch and zooms work in Skype.
I think the Boltons, if I look at the map, I think they're like one of the southern, one of the southernmost.
I thought the Dreadfort was just east of Winterfell because I thought the Dreadfort was kind of close to Winterfell, which is why the Boltons are the first ones to get to Winterfell when Theon takes it.
Um, I'm not seeing. I'm not seeing the Dreadfort here for some reason. Hmm. They
I'd
are
highlight it
definitely
if
pretty.
if
Oh, I
if
see
I
them. Yeah,
could,
yeah,
but
yeah, yeah. They're east. Yep. Yeah, so they're pretty far north actually. But yeah, their sigil is a flayed man, which is obviously very brutal for anyone that doesn't know what flaying is. It's
you take off their skin.
yeah, you do a little like prick on like the finger and then you just peel the skin off like a potato.
Yum, yum, yum.
And that's their thing. That's their big thing. And it's
Mm,
like somewhat hinted at that they also like cook the people that they flay, kind of.
oh, I didn't know
Um,
that.
it's definitely hinted at. There's also a great um it's also hinted at that they stopped doing this, but then like it's a tradition that they used to do, but then they don't do it anymore. But obviously we come face to face with Ramsay Bolton or Ramsay Snow. Um, and Roose Bolton makes like a passing comment at some point in time where he's talking about like his shoes that were made of like human skin,
Oh,
something like
human
that.
left.
He's like, yeah, human leather doesn't hold up well in the snow. And
This
people are like, what the fuck?
is this all book stuff? Because I don't remember any of this being in the show.
I can't recall.
Because in the books, the Boltons are very different and more, not to be punny, but fleshed out.
Yes,
In the show,
definitely.
Roose is just shown a couple of times, and then, the Red Wedding stuff happens.
Yes.
There's like an entire troop of loud people right outside my door, just yelling.
Oh my God. I can't I can't hear that. No.
Thank goodness.
When
But
Ramsay and Rose meet up in Barrowtown, Roose has to talk Ramsay down from a horrible idea. Ramsay's face darkened. If I cut off her teats and feed them to my girls, will she abide me then? Will she abide me if I strip off her skin to make myself a pair of boots?
Yeah,
Uh,
you're reading from the book.
Unlikely, and those boots would come, dear. Yeah, it is
Oh.
from the book.
Well, yeah, I mean in the book, Roos is like has like a problem where he like leeches himself all the time. He's like a
Yeah.
really sickly looking man, and he wears like pink coats to be the color of flesh in honor of his house. He's like a really twisted character in the books. He's like really, really apathetic and laconic. Like he
Hmm.
always has like an even temper and voice. I mean, Ramsey is pretty similar to what he is in the books, just like a madman who loves torturing people.
Yeah, so apparently Ramsay still doesn't understand. And so he has to say it like even more explicitly. How many of our grudging friends do you imagine we'd retain if the truth were known? Only Lady Barbara, whom you would turn into a pair of boots, inferior boots. Human skin is not as tough as cowhide and will not wear as well. Jesus.
He does. I think he does kill Lady Barbary anyway.
I think so, yeah.
She's not in the show, so there's a lot of what happens in the Dance of Dragons book is brutal because none of that is in the show. So
Mm-hmm.
uh, at any rate,
Rob.
that's where Theon is. Rob has some good victories um, over the Lannisters. It seems like they're kind of winning the war, but they need to reaffirm their alliance with House Frey because Rob broke his promise to marry one of Frey's kids, which was not a good. So instead, they like renegotiate so that um, Edmure, who's Catelyn's brother, will marry one of the Freys.
Yes. Is this Blackfish or whatever his name is?
No, Edmure Tully.
Yeah, he has a nickname though.
That is Bryden or Braden Blackfish. That is Catelyn's uncle,
Hmm.
who's also present in pretty much every scene with Edmure. And he is at the Red Wedding, but he leaves early because he doesn't like weddings. And he's the only character who's smart enough there to be like, something weird's happening, and he just ducks out the back.
Oh shit, Edmure Tully nicknamed Baelish Littlefinger.
Mm. Yeah, Edmure Tully's also an idiot. But that I did not know that. So yeah, they get together for a big wedding so that basically the Starks can realign with the
This is season 3
Freys.
still?
Yes,
Oh shit.
and then all of the Starks are killed.
Yep.
The Freys betray them. Robb is killed. His pregnant wife is killed. Catelyn is killed because the Boltons, the evil people who wear human skin, it turns out teamed up with the Lannisters. Who would have thought? It is actually a shocking moment, but it's one of those things where if you think about it even a little bit, it's like, oh, right, the skin wearing people teamed up with the villains, right, of
Yeah, the
course.
people who have all the money and try to control everything obviously just paid off the people who love flaying people. Yeah.
Yeah, not
Watching
surprising.
watching this episode with non-reading individuals was very, very fascinating. Because anyone who read the stories knew exactly what was going to happen.
Mm,
And then, because, like, I mean, we watched the show, like, because as it was released every Sunday,
mm.
um, we would watch it in college together. And it was always fun to kind of like talk about afterwards and also see people's reactions to things that they didn't know were going to happen, but then also seeing like how it lined up with the book, if it did line up or not. Um, so yeah, Catelyn is killed, but somehow what? What?
But somehow what?
Never mind. Catelyn's killed.
Yeah, just slit ear to ear.
Yep.
Yeah,
That's
in the book, she becomes a zombie that like wages war in the Riverlands for books 4 and 5. But in the
doesn't
show,
she
she's just dead.
doesn't she team up with the the like guys that run around hanging people.
She rules the Brotherhood without banners in the books.
Yeah, yeah.
Beric Dondarrion in the books dies permanently, and
Hmm.
Thoros resurrects Catelyn instead. So Beric is resurrected in the books repeatedly until they find Catelyn's body, and then Beric gives his life up, and Thoros resurrects Catelyn, who is like a mute ghost monster named Lady Stoneheart, who
Yeah.
exacts vengeance on everyone. So there's like a bunch of chapters where like there's one chapter where like this one Frey who was at the Red Wedding gets caught by the Brotherhood, and he keeps lying and being like, nah, dude, I wasn't there. Like, I didn't know about it. I'm not an important Frey or anything. And then he sees Lady Stoneheart and he's like, oh, fuck. Because he was there and she just recognizes him. So they just hang him instantly.
Yeah.
It's a really, really funny part of the book because he, like, that's actually what I think he thinks to himself. He's like, shit, she was there. But yeah,
Nobody can hide from Lady Stoneheart.
all that cool shit, not in the show.
So Catelyn Stark in the show does just die.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then they use like her being brought back as Beric Dondarrion in the show essentially to serve a similar function. Almost.
You could very vaguely say that. It would
Okay.
not really be accurate. They basically just take that whole arc and write it out of the show.
Yeah.
Because this was the last bit we didn't talk about from season 3, which is Brienne and Jaime's journey through the Riverlands to get back to King's Landing. Because this Brienne and Jaime try to secretly get back to King's Landing, and there's all these scenes where basically there are philosophical debates between Jaime and Brienne about what makes a good knight and why Jaime is a scumbag and why Brienne, just like everyone else, perceives him as being like evil. And there's a great scene after he gets his hand cut off because they get captured by the Bolton soldiers and are brought to Harrenhal, which the Boltons take back from the Lannisters at some point off screen. Jaime explains why he killed the Mad King and explains like why he is the way he is, and it makes him much more sympathetic, and it's kind of like a journey for him to move in the right direction, to be more heroic instead of more evil.
Yeah.
Which they immediately go back on in the 4th season, but
yeah, I was gonna say in the books the reader can find themselves rooting more for Jaime in this moment because he's like kind of more of a tragic character in a lot of ways, and then like his arc you find yourself aligning with more because he's trying to do something like good despite his past.
Right. I mean, he wants to be good.
Yeah.
And part of that is because of Brienne's influence on him, because Brienne is such a noble person. Like Brienne is the ultimate heroic knight. So yeah, in this season, he is sent by Roose Bolton, who now runs Harrenhal. This is before the Red Wedding. They plan the Red Wedding off screen at this moment, actually, but Roose sends Jaime and Qyburn, who's just like a random disgraced maester, back to King's Landing, and they leave Brienne behind, but Jaime decides to go back, and he saves Brienne from being killed by a bear in a pit. But Jaime loses his right hand, his fighting hand, so he's basically questions everything about himself because his whole identity was being a great fighter, and now he never will be again.
Yeah.
I think that about wraps up season 3. It's another great season. I mean, like you said, the Reigns of Castamere is a phenomenal episode. This Red Wedding behind me is a really shocking moment if you didn't read the books, which I should note, I watched the show before I read any of the books. And I watched the show while it was becoming really popular. Like I wasn't on the show when it was at its beginning. I started the show in between the airing of the 4th and 5th season, which as it turned out was the absolute worst time to become a fan of the show, but alas.
This is a great pause point, especially since I have to go to the bathroom.
All right.
We'll be right